6 Board of Education meeting, Committee of the Whole, on Monday, January 13th, 2014, will come to order at 7:15 p.m. Would you kindly join me in a recite the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Skoda.
Present.
Ms. Manley.
Present.
Mr. Corcoran.
Here.
Mr. Kuhn. Mr. Cassini.
Here.
Mrs. Gallo. Present. Mrs. Planson.
Here. Okay, next on the agenda, we have adjournment to closed session to discuss the appointment, employment, compensation of employees, but will also include collective bargaining as well. Is there a motion to adjourn to closed session?
So moved.
Moved by Rick, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Victor. Roll call, please.
Dr. Skoda.
Aye.
Ms. Manley.
Aye.
Mr. Cassini.
Aye.
Mr. Corcoran.
Aye.
Mrs. Gallo.
Yes.
Mrs. Planson.
Aye. Okay, so for this time, we will convene to closed session. At this point, we should be back at about 8 o'clock, at which time we do anticipate taking action after that time. Instead of you leaving, we're gonna leave. We kind of figured it would be easier. We're gonna go to a side room. So I hope that's okay. Yep, room 124G.
Yeah.
At this time to open session, currently at 8:13 p.m. Next on the agenda is audience communication, and I have one individual
I
sign.
first would like to make a point of order. The agenda has been changed tonight. Contrary to decades-old practice of having audience communication at the end of the meeting. Once again, I believe such a change in past practice cannot be unilaterally done by the board president. And I would make a motion with this that it is going to be changed and the whole board vote on it. So I would make a motion that audience communication be included also at the end of the meeting.
Can that be voted on without being on the agenda?
Sure it can. This is a point of order.
I don't believe that it can be. But you know what, while you bring it up, I did take it off because we have been running very late and something had to give. I tried to start or commence meetings with closed session early at 6 o'clock so that we could get out of here. Some board members have conflicts with that. At the last meeting, we went so late, we did not even have a quorum. So
Okay, a
something
point of
has
order.
got to give.
A point of order needs to be overruled or sustained by majority of the board. So that is my objection. And if you're going to overrule me on the point of order, there needs to be 4 votes against it. And once again, the 2 or 3 minutes you're saving. And once again, the president should create at the whim of the president. We can decide to have comments or not have comments. Is very, very dangerous. And the other thing is, I believe anybody that's going to sit here for 2 or 3 hours has a right to say something. So anyway, that's my point of order, so it needs to either be sustained or rejected.
Can't we just amend the agenda?
We can if that's what people want to do. I was trying to make an effort to have this go forward more quickly.
Well, really, the point of order needs to be addressed.
I would rather amend the agenda to having audience communication at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
I mean, if we're only going to have one, but it's important, I get your point, Dr. Skoda, it is important to have 2.
Okay, so I withdraw my point of order, and I second Kay's motion that we amend the agenda.
Well, okay, if we all agree, we can do that, so I need input from the other members.
Amend the agenda to say what?
To take audience communication a second time
At the end of the meeting.
prior to adjournment to closed session.
I agree with Dr. Skoda.
I would like to, if people stay that late, I would like to see it on there. I think that we do have to appreciate that the meetings are going super long and that we are listening to what everybody says. So I actually agree with Claudia on that side, but I also believe that Rick's, the respect issue about showing people some time at the end of the meeting is is also important, so I would like to see it stay on for now, and then we can debate this again another time.
He's fine if it's the majority wants to do that.
Yeah, I happen to agree with Claudia. We have a lot of important business to do, and we have to balance the audience communication with getting our business done. We have not talked at all about the timing limit issue, which is another one. I agree with the 2-minute time limit. I think that's fine, and if we agree to that as a group, then if we want to have it twice, which I think is ridiculous, but if we want to have it twice, then I'm all right with that too.
I think that a good compromise is a 2-minute at the end. Gives people an opportunity to say something if they want,
So
but
five
it's,
at the beginning, 2 at the end.
Now, we need, if you're gonna do that, you need to have a board policy. All we're voting on right now is amending the agenda tonight.
See, I think that maybe it's one that we should pull probably for policy.
I think both for policy, and in my opinion, would be shorten the front one to 3 minutes and the back one to 2 minutes, and at least consider something along with that, but consider it at
That's
the
a
policy
good
committee,
compromise.
that way we reduce at the front end.
Right, so,
Yeah,
that,
excuse me, and the first one should be on agenda items only. The first audience communication agenda items only, that's how it used to be. And the second one was whatever
you know
anybody
what, I
wanted to
wish our
talk about.
policy actually said that.
Right, so, I mean, that's just information.
Okay, so given that there are 5 members that wish to amend the agenda, we will amend the
Well, it
agenda.
needs to be a formal vote. It can't just be a straw vote. I mean, there's been a motion and a second. So it
It's
needs
not
to
on the agenda, right?
we're amending the agenda.
Yeah,
Right.
and we're all, there's 5 people who say that it's gonna be amended, so.
So there doesn't have to be a formal vote.
Okay, so audience communication, the only one signed in today is Carla Heinkine.
So then I'll wait for the end.
You will wait for the end?
Okay.
All right. We have computer problems over there, so we have nobody for audience communication. Okay, board reports, and Mr. Parker needs to go do something, who would be up next. So
Can you do the
we
ad
will
hoc?
move on to the ad hoc committee and then go back to the finance committee if there's no objection. As to the ad hoc committee report, I believe that this is time based on advice of council needs to be tabled. Is that correct, Dr. Law?
Yes.
So we will address this at another time. There's a little bit more work that needs to be done apparently. Mr. Corcoran is.
I left my bag, yes.
The next board report is the finance committee, which is Mr. Corcoran, regarding the acceptance of the auditor's comprehensive annual financial report and management letter. I believe Mr. Yeager may have some information for this as well.
Correct, we received the auditor's report and we had detailed discussion at the finance committee on January 8th. And I believe that there weren't, I believe that the committee is recommending that the board accept the audit. And I think that will be the motion that we will be recommending. What I did want to do, though, because we had a detailed discussion about the management letter, I wanted to take a couple minutes and read this, a portion of the letter into the meeting, because it talks about some weaknesses in an area that we want to improve, and this is part of, I call some reform measures that we're trying to implement in the business office, so I could take a minute to do that. This is online as well. I'm taking out the management letter, which is the first page, and it's talking about deficiencies and weaknesses. So a material weakness is a deficiency or combination of the deficiencies in internal control such that there is a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement of the entity's financial statements will not be prevented or detected and corrected on a timely basis. We consider the following deficiencies the district's internal control to be material weaknesses as discussed further in the following pages. And there's 2 material weaknesses. One, segregation of duties, and the second, internal control over financial reporting. So I believe that that this is really one of the intrinsic reasons of why we need perform in the business office, and that's been addressed through the new organization chart as well as the positions we're looking, the skill set of the people we're looking for. In addition, we're also looking at, we're reviewing a new accounting system. Our accounting system is more than 10 years old and is a COBOL-based system as well. So these are, I would say, legacy issues which we're working with the administration to try to clear. And secondly, a significant deficiency, there are two of these. A significant deficiency is a deficiency or combination of deficiencies in internal control that is less severe than a material weakness, yet important enough to merit attention by those charged with governance, which is us. We consider the following deficiencies in the district's internal control to be significant deficiencies, as discussed further in the following pages. One is capital asset records, and the second is information technology controls, meaning the overall IT system. And it goes on about in more detail, but I think it was worthy to read those in. I think, Gary, if you have any other comments.
I'd like to report to the board that the capital assets records deficiency noted will be overcome with the different software system and the employment of a supervisor and coordinator for purchasing. In my experiences in other organizations, the software package that was employed directly reports to your inventory control system through the purchasing director any asset acquisition that is made during the course of the year, and the updated inventory is automatically compiled through the software system.
So Gary, in your discussions with the auditor, did you have discussions about these material weaknesses and significant weaknesses?
Yes, we discussed them at length, and the auditor was comfortable that the actions that we're contemplating to add several positions in the business office and have some different responsibilities for the business manager would be sufficient to address his concerns and set the district on a course of fiscal responsibility that he, the auditor, was comfortable with.
Essentially, there's two positions in the business office, one a purchasing officer, and the second would be a financial controller position that's under the chief financial controller. And then separately inside of the HR department, there's a different alignment of say, checks and balances that are put into the system. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The software package that we have reviewed administratively has features that will be used to get us much closer to the desired outcome of the auditor and put the district in a much more safeguarded position, fiscally speaking.
Yeah, I don't have any other discussion on this point. Victor, do you have anything to add?
No.
Any other board members? I'd like to make a motion to accept the annual financial report for previous year that was presented to the Finance Committee and the board.
Okay, motion by Ed, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Victor, roll call please.
Mr. Corcoran?
Aye.
Mr. Kuhn?
Aye.
Mrs. Gallo?
Aye.
Mrs. Blanson?
Aye.
Dr. Skoda?
Aye.
Mr. Cassini?
Aye.
Ms. Manlin?
Aye. All right, so we already went over at the ad hoc committee. Next on down to administration reports, superintendent report, Dr. Law, HYA and Associates. Is on the agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Manley. So, as I said to the board in August, we'll be bringing back in January a review of where we are using consultants in these interim positions. And through a series of events, we brought back a report that would indicate we would like to extend our engagement with Hazard Young and TN Associates, specifically for the services of an interim business manager, as well as an interim assistant superintendent for instruction. Each of them has very specific deliverables to give to Hinsdale District 86, and we would like to engage them for that purpose. I've attached a brief summary of where we are and looking also at the budget ahead through the end of the school year. So I'd be happy to entertain your questions about these.
Would that be under the same terms and conditions of the contract? Is this an extension of the contract then, or?
Yes.
Bruce, we had an original budget of X, and this is, you're asking for an extension of X plus what? Is it 186,000?
Yeah, we had,
Original budget?
yeah, we had originally had a budget of $186,120, and the actuals through 11/30 are $145,290. We don't have invoices yet for December, of course, so that number represents where we are through November 30th. Moving forward, there's the budget. I don't know really have a budget for this. What I do have though are funds from people who were on staff who are no longer with us, who are
Yeah, what I was
currently
getting
not
at,
paid.
this is an offset, so the people that haven't been hired yet, that they're open positions that were budgeted for, so you're basically taking the money from those positions and putting it into this. So I think when you write that up, you should write that up so that it's clear that it's technically not unbudgeted, as long as we're not overspending in both accounts. So you've got this account for temporary personnel, and then you have the account for permanent that's not being used because the people have not been hired yet.
Correct, but as far as hitting a particular budget line, I've got a salary account that we're not using, and then we've got other budget lines.
So it's really just asking, I'm just asking to reconcile the two, so that we're not letting us know that we're not over budget on the sum of those two.
We're not over budget on some of those two.
I was gonna ask you, net, is it less than?
It is less. I don't have that number. I'd have to look at that, but it's less.
Okay. I mean, it will be projected to be less through the 6/30/14 date you're asking for.
Yeah, yes.
Well, the money might be less, I just want to reiterate the point that the productivity is less also, because people aren't up to speed, we don't have the experience. So for the business operations, we're going to take it to a total of 100 days?
Yes, Mr. Yegi is available to 100 days, and I'd like to use him for all 100 of those days.
Okay, I was quite surprised to see that as of November 30th, we were only at 36 days at business operations. So then, especially during, only 36 days before doing all that levy work, I was quite surprised at that. Where HR was here, we had them for 67 days. So I was just very surprised with that. The amount underneath of 5,200 for business operations and communications for 27,575, what are those two amounts signifying?
The amount 5,200 is, we brought in John Nywing to help us with facilities and other, that I wanted to include that in this little spreadsheet. And the communication position was originally budgeted for 15 days. We very quickly used that, and so for all the routine communication matters we have and other needs that we have, we engaged the communications person on a daily basis. And so that 27,575 would reflect the 15 days we originally budgeted plus the additional days that she spent for that.
I would suggest your consideration on using John and Irene for up to 60 days, because we still don't have the 2014 capital projects done. He's been serving, actually doing work that traditionally the business office would be doing. So until such time that you populate the business office, I believe that he's been a key factor in progress and coordination.
And we have an item on the agenda tonight to extend his engagement with the district. And not that many days, so when I think when we get to that item, we could, you could recommend more days. It'd be like a not to exceed amount.
And what about the amount spent for Mr. Longquist, the interim business manager, prior to HYA?
I did not include that in this particular worksheet because I was looking at the specific engagement we had with HYA, but it would be part of a report I should bring back to the board at the end of the year to show here's how much we spent on consultants, here's how much we would have spent on salaries specifically, so you could see all the breakdown of what we spent. But he's not on here because he was never part of it. In fact, the other point to that is he was paid out of the he was paid out of that salary.
Just as long as we're keeping track of that.
Yeah.
Is there any further discussion on this item?
So it's for your consideration. I'll bring it back at the next meeting and request approval for it.
All right, next up is student performance and achievement measures. Very long report.
Very long report, and one of the things that, as I said in the memo, just I'm sure you reviewed it and you'll have your questions, but I think that one of the most important things for us to do is to take this report and put it with the PSAE, because we see excellent growth at both our high schools, and it is a testament to the hard work of our teachers, because as you can see from the unevenness of the way of the Explorer scores, students coming into Hinsdale South, their trend lines are up and down, but once they get to Hinsdale South, they all go up. This is just growth, however, and growth doesn't tell the whole story. If you have a child that is born and only weighs 4 pounds, you would expect that child to gain weight quickly. By 18 months, the parent is going to be happy with the amount of growth that child has attained. But that's not the question the parent will ask. The question was, at 18 months, is my child what? Is this normal? So the corollary in schools is we have students who are growing once they enter our doors. And as I said, we should really celebrate that. And I don't want to gloss over that too quickly, because it is a testament to the work we're doing. However, our work isn't done, because if that growth doesn't accelerate, we will never close the achievement gap. So the takeaway for us as we look at these data is to realize that we have programs in place that are helping students grow, but we're going to have to figure out ways to accelerate that growth if we're going to close the achievement gap, because the attainment of students is just as important as their academic growth. If they don't come up to the level that they need to be, now that's not, that's arbitrarily set by the state, but nonetheless, it's a measure we can compare all students.
I don't want to interrupt, I just had a quick question regarding that, closing the achievement gap. How realistic can you expect to close that achievement gap once they get to this point in high school? Because as we know, it's much easier to close the gap at a much younger age. So when they get to our high schools as freshmen, realistically, what can we expect that closure to look like, if at all?
That's such an important question, and well, first thing I think to say is I think this report helps us see that really we should see from this what our focus is. It is how do we accelerate the growth, and as you point out, there are ways of doing that. The most important of which is the more students come to us prepared, the less ground there is to make up. So that is our ability to articulate effectively with our feeder districts is so important. Because, as you say, by the time we get them as freshmen, the spring of their junior year, April in their junior year, they're taking this test. We sometimes have a lot of ground to make up and not very much time. And then we also have students who are not even there that long who move in. So the articulation that we can do with our feeder districts is extremely important. And but I don't want to put it all on that. We need to be looking at ways that we can accelerate the growth, because we know the growth is there. You can see it in the data. The question is, how do we accelerate it so that we do whatever we can and do more than we've been doing to help close the achievement gap. I think it's possible. There are schools and there are instances where it's done. It's heavy lifting, but now we know, okay, yes, growing is great. We need to do more to close the achievement gap.
So will there be then a focus in this coming year or two on working with the feeder districts?
We have, as everyone well knows, we have new leadership coming to both buildings and to the district office and curriculum. I think it's fair to say that will be a very important focus.
Is there a difference at the rate, I don't know how to get of the scores that the students enter Hinsdale Central for the feeder districts, and the scores of the students who enter Hinsdale South?
There is a difference, and we have data of contract with Advantage Analytics to do the statistics for us, basically, because I want to make sure that the numbers are absolutely right. And in a huge database, you can see that students come to Hinsdale Central and Hinsdale South in very different places. And of course, that speaks to how much ground we have to make up at Hinsdale South. So yes, there is a significant difference.
And do you foresee some sort of program for that, or what's in the chimney list?
You know, in talking to theater districts, you know, we have been talking to them about joining together to look at student growth as not just individual districts, but as a system of 7 feeders, 1 high school district. They are very eager to have the opportunity to see how their students do once they get to our school. We, of course, want to have more information about the students than just their Explore score. And there are severe obstacles to try to getting that done because we're different districts. We have to have all kinds of agreements because of privacy issues and various things. But to have a firm that can provide for us the kind of analytics for student growth measures, you know, it gives us the opportunity to begin to have conversations like we've never had with our feeder districts about not just, you know, how students are doing, but what's working. And so there are plans to improve this. I mean, the advantage I think now we have with having these data is, you know, we can very clearly see the work that needs to be done.
Are you looking for more questions, or do you
Oh,
want to?
yes, absolutely. No,
Or
I'm.
do you want to have a presentation and?
No, I mean, I actually said more than I probably should have at the beginning, but I did want to kind of front load this. So, no, this is your time to ask questions.
Bruce, when you put this report together in the future, can you put numbers to this? I mean, you have test scores, but for example, a certain population of students, you don't have a number, like we had in the past. So how many students?
Oh, how many students? Okay, yeah.
So if you can include that in the future? Because I mean, some of these subcategories, there might only be 1 or 2 students, so if it's a downward trend for 2 students, is that really worthwhile to look at the data? I think we've seen that number in the past. So if you can just include that.
I have some questions. Can you explain the difference between the ACT and the Aspire that's coming, I think, is it next year? And what is it just, what is the difference? Is it just a different name, or is it looking at testing differently? Can you just kind of explain?
Yeah, my understanding of this is that with Illinois, as you know, is in a consortium with PARC to assess Common Core. This has left ACT out of the testing game, and which is unfortunate for them for obvious financial reasons. It's unfortunate for us because we have so much data from Explore Plan ACT that if we move to a completely different testing regime, we will lose longitudinal data that would be valuable. So one of the things that ACT is doing is they're, I believe, trying to offer an alternative way of assessing, alternative to PARC for assessing Common Core. And there are some issues, obviously, that states have experienced in trying to use PARC, so that will remain to be seen. But ACT is very much in the game.
So we will be using
And
are they calling it Aspire or ACT Aspire?
well, I believe they're calling it Aspire, but it may be ACT Aspire just to continuity sake. But we will be piloting some of these, yeah, because we don't know what's going to happen with the whole testing thing. I mean, it's who knows how that's going to end up.
Do these scores show any great strength for either school where we're really doing a great job?
One of the places that the I think shows great strength for the schools is in the area of growth for students who come in at low levels. I think that's a tremendous area. You know, you would expect students who have more, have farther to go to make up some of that ground, and in fact, they do that. I think the AP scores on the AP test participation, the AP program in South in general is really doing quite well.
And the corollary is there a subject or an area where there's a weakness that we can do better?
Yeah, I think that one of the areas that we can do better at, and then I'm trying to find, because I knew you were going to, so I'm trying to find, is make sure that my memory serves, is I think that we could do better in science, as I recall. I think we can do better in science. And, you know, to that point, there's we're getting next generation science standards, so the science teachers will be able to have the opportunity to review curriculum and you know, their curriculum by these new standards and make changes based on that, so there's an opportunity.
And I guess I'm kind of just curious, given the difference in the sequencing of the curriculum between Central and South, where is there more improvement needed? Through which curriculum?
So you're asking if the sequence of the science curriculum in Central South are having an impact on the scores? Yeah, that's a very good question, and obviously that would be, you know, that sounds like a research question to me to try to figure out if there's a corollary between a physics, chemistry, biology sequence on scores as opposed to the traditional biology, chemistry, physics sequence, and I don't have the answer to that.
You'd have to have a control group, but we don't have a control group at South for that, so I don't know how it's a theoretical question.
But also
There are
it's
ways
the
to get at it.
preparedness of the feeder schools.
Right.
What they teach the kids, the feeder schools are different from Central and South.
And that would be the other point, that what, you know, if you're going to do a study on this, you'd have to take into consideration the relative positions that the students started from, you know, all the feeders in both our schools.
But if you're just looking at South, it wouldn't matter, because the feeders are constant. What it would be is you have to have control between the Central curriculum and the South curriculum, which you don't have. Those same supervisors.
Well, that's correct, but the point I was making about the feeders is that if the students that, I'm speaking, you know, well, not really hypothetically, if the students coming into South in their science are at a level that's lower than what they are, so we're going to have to account for that somehow if we're going to be making judgments about the effectiveness of the sequence.
Just so, a clarification question, perhaps you can explain to me. Let's see, I think where it's about page 14, where it talks about the one I'm looking at, the composite ACT scores by race at Central, and the composite growth explored to ACT by race. Can you explain to me why the composite is so jagged like that as compared to the composite ACT scores versus the growth explored ACT? Do you see the difference between the two? Can you, and it goes on for like that on several examples or several graphs that you give. Can you explain why that is?
So the question is, there seems to be a lot more variation, or a lot more variance, I should say, when we're just looking at the scores as opposed to the growth explored at ACT.
Yes.
You know, I've got, this is like Woody Allen, we got Marshall McLuhan, and you know, so I actually have Clay Graham here. Because I think I have an answer, but I'd rather refer to the expert. Dr. Graham, could you answer that question?
Sure. That's a very relevant question.
Can we have you come up to the microphone, sir?
Sure.
Thank you.
This is Dr. Clayton Graham, who's the statistician we've used to put these data in from advanced analytics.
Okay, the question was referring to why is there so much variation in the growth rate as compared to the linear change from year to year. If you take a look at that growth rate...
Hang on, Dr. Graham, I'm not sure your microphone's on.
Is it green? You might have gone to sleep.
not? And we always know when the light comes on, it works, right? Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Too bad. Okay, the question is very simply, you're talking about a regular growth rate of a curve of performance. In other words, year to year, you have a consistent type of growth. The slope of that growth is what we're talking about toward improvement. Improvement and forecasting improvement is much more difficult and much more sporadic than just focusing on what is going to take place next. In other words, if the stock market is at 15,000, okay, it's pretty easy to forecast that, gee, maybe in the next month it'll be up to 16,000. It's very difficult to forecast the individual change from year to year. In mathematical terms, it's the first derivative. I always like throwing out mathematical terms because I'm a mathematician, but that's okay. Now, the important thing to take a look at, and each of those charts that you see are broken apart by the trend of what is going with respect to scores, and the bottom part with respect to growth. And you're always going to have a dichotomy between the general trend and the growth in forecasting. It is much more difficult to forecast growth, and there's much more and the reason it's more difficult is it's more inconsistent. Does that make sense?
It does, but I guess I just am, because these are actuals, so I don't know,
Could you show me the one you're looking at?
yeah,
Refer
I'm
to it
looking,
specifically,
it's
please.
number 14,
I don't know what 14 is.
page 14.
I can barely count that.
This
Okay.
is this is the one, this is the first one on this.
A little too quickly, a little slow. Okay, this is Central, and this is showing the composite scores by race at Central, and it shows the different things, and you see it goes, the actual movements. Those are just the regular ACT scores,
Yes.
actual movements.
Right.
This is the change from year to year. What happens from year to year?
Okay.
It's just going, and so you're going to have more volatility in
Yes.
a year from year to year situation, which is not surprising. That's completely normal. Okay.
Yeah, it is. It's just, it was shocking to see such,
What-
the variances.
Maybe that's why I put those two charts there so you could see that. So when people talk about growth and what they expect, they have to have realistic expectations. Okay?
Okay, thank you. That's true, it does.
Should I just stay here for assaults or what?
I had to have a couple more questions.
Sure.
And probably not on the graphs, unfortunately, but I have we do the bridge program at South for AP classes, you know, to increase that number. Is there a talk of doing that for Central, for the group of kids who, yeah, borderline, who could use that extra help? Because you talk about wanting to increase your AP numbers, you know, at both schools. Is there talk about doing that at Central?
One of the things that we will be looking at, not for this summer because it's too close, but we will be looking at a summer school program that could include something like that. The AP Bridge program at South is funded through Title I dollars, which means that only students who are at risk as well as low income are able to take advantage of that. And obviously, it's well, we can infer it's been very successful, given what we're seeing at South. I mean, I don't know that we can make that claim of causation, but yeah, we are talking about a summer school program that could offer some of these opportunities to.
Would you be able to offer that on a tuition basis to the Central students? Or, the South students who maybe don't fit
Sure.
that category?
Sure. But the idea is looking at summer school from a different perspective, maybe a broader perspective, so we can do what else can we do in the summer that would help students besides what we're already doing?
That's a comment that I've had before, is why don't we have a huge amount of underutilized resources in the summer, so we should take a broader look at summer school in general because of how busy kids are during the year and lowering the stress level for kids being able to take things in the summer. And also we have kids with IEPs, and some of their IEPs say that they really should be going to school year round, and we don't really offer that type of program. We offer kind of a consolidated summer school. So I think in general, a good look at the summer school program for 2015 would be really a prudent thing for us to do.
And we know that students lose quite a bit over the summer. That's been demonstrated.
And how long does it take them to regain it?
That I don't even know how, I couldn't even quote you how much they lose, but I know that this cycle we have of 3 months off, or whatever it is, for some students is very detrimental. And the very students for whom it's detrimental, the very students we're trying to accelerate, we're trying to accelerate their growth.
Don't we have a program called the Extended School Year?
Yes.
Okay. And how does that work?
Dr. Powell, why don't you talk about this in the school year, what that's.
The extended school year is for special education students, and it is written into their IEP, decided by the team whether they qualify for that or not. It's essentially a 6-week program, 5 to 6 weeks, about half the day. And there are identified goals in their IEP that are specific to being addressed over the summer. So it differs for each student. But primarily you'd have students regressing in the area of reading, sometimes in math. And so the focus of the programs would be in those areas. And then again, our life skills, our students with, our foundation students, their life skill programming would be addressed as well, including at the transition center.
And the utilization of the extended school year program, what are the numbers on that?
That's a good question. I don't have that on my fingertips.
So I thought one time I had a conversation with you, some parents don't, even if their child does have an IEP, do not want their
Correct.
child in.
Yeah, very often a student will qualify and then a parent will decline for various reasons. They have other things going on in the summer. But I'd be happy to come back with the exact numbers of what we've had over the past couple of summers.
And it's a specific 6-week program?
Mhm.
Okay.
Right, but to address the individual needs.
Correct.
Are there any further questions from any board member here on this 54-page report? Okay. So then it's Dr. Graham, correct?
Call me Clay.
Clay, thank you for coming.
Thank you. So we're through with that?
We are.
I want to answer one question. One of the gentlemen back here asked me a question, so I figure it's from the floor. It's an important one. And he was talking about this 11% thing. Okay? In the report...
Dr. Clay, can we give this some context about, please share with the audience and the board what you mean by 11%.
You know what page that's on?
Yes.
So you can get it up
Yeah,
on
there's
the
a
screen.
chart in there that will look similar to,
There you go. What page is that? 13 or so?
looks like this. Okay? You had it pulled up, so you know the page over there, right? You know.
What page is it? What verse?
I'm looking for
He had it up there before, he liked that, okay. Okay, first of all, let's take a look what the title says. It's always a good idea to talk about what the title says. Central and South, the top 11% of the state's district in terms of exceeding expectations. Exceeding expectations. So therefore, we have to determine what are the expectations for those two schools. Even though I'm a professor, I am not an educator until last year when I got my teaching and learning certificate from DePaul. And it ain't too hot, so bear with me. I build mathematical models. That's what I do. I do them for Major League Baseball. I do them for aerospace engineering. All I do is build models with equations. Sounds boring, but boy, it's a lot of fun. So building a model for Hinsdale, we took a combination of the educational attainment of the parents, limited English proficiency, proportion of low income, the attendance rate. Why is attendance important? Remember the great Western philosopher Woody Allen? 80% of life is showing up. Mobility and ACT scores, on all those things, I forecast what should that score be? What should that score be? In doing that, I find that Hinsdale Central was 14% above the average score in the state. Hinsdale South was 7%. And the distribution of all the scores in the state creates this. Here you guys are out in the tail. You're exceeding expectations based on the people that you get in and their demographics. The students you get into the demographics. That's pretty impressive. The other part, since the question was phrased, where do we rank? Anybody know where Hinsdale Central ranks in the state as a high school? Take away the magnet schools. Anybody know? Number one. How about South? Anybody care about South? I hope so. I hope so. South came out 80th in the state, which is around 12%, pretty close to the same as the expectation. So you're still talking about two of the most outstanding high schools in the state, for heaven's sakes. Both of which are exceeding expectations significantly. I had to get that off my chest. Thank you.
Hey, Clay, one question. So how many total schools are there when we're number 1 and number 80?
Okay, that's an excellent question, because everyone doesn't furnish all their data. Okay, and basically in terms of high schools, there's about 700. 700. And the ones that don't furnish their data probably would be not so hot anyway.
So Clay, do you ever make the presentation to school districts where you say, you guys are underachieving?
Yes, I do, all the time. And we have to talk about how that's improved. Let me give you an example. Some years ago, I went to Schaumburg 54, elementary district. And one of the problems is that the data comes in from the state is not usable in its form that it's given. There are many inconsistencies, gaps, and all that. We have to fix the data, which we do in a certain degree with a lot of these things here. One of the things that the state uses is meet and exceed stuff. Everybody familiar with meet and exceed? Know what it means? In reading, meet and exceed, Schaumburg 54, 80%. Reading, 80%. Math, 82%. Science, 90%. So you say, hey, those are all pretty good. We're going to spend some time spending money in reading. You go through and you look at the numbers and get the proportions, just like we did with respect to the bands. It ended up that it was 79% in reading. That was the percentile, converting to percentile. 79, 78, 80, and in science, 50. The state numbers misdirect how you allocate funds and make your efforts. That very day, Ed Rafferty and his whole team, their mouths dropped open, and said, we have to change everything. And they went from being the 150th district in the state to now they're up to 61, I think. And their movement in science is just going off the charts. So taking the information from the state to say it's dangerous, I say it's insanity. But you have to fix the data and look at it right and talk about what's going on. Okay? Make sense?
All right, Clay, thank you for presenting.
You got what you need. Thank you.
And Bruce, who found Clay?
I did. I knew of him from the work he's done with other school districts.
So we've never had work done like this before?
Yes, it was.
Not that I know of.
Good job. Okay, next on to the business report, Mr. Yagi. the second quarter G fund report.
The business office is a plan of action to report to the board every 3 months on the condition of the G fund accounts, as well as you'll hear a report at the January 27th meeting on the actual versus budgeted amount of expenditures for all of our accounts. And the G fund report is presented for information only for the board and the public to see the multitude of different activity accounts that exist in the organization and the way we monitor and keep track of them.
Are there any questions for Mr. Yagi on the G fund report?
Can you explain to the audience what the G fund, it sounds like that, a G-man?
It's just a general fund activity accounts is all G fund stands for, is my understanding. The first time I heard the terminology was when I arrived in this district as well. I believe it's general fund activity accounts.
And are you responsible for overseeing that, just like the other funds? I mean, the other,
The ultimate responsibility rests with the business office, yes, and I'm the chief administrator for the business office.
and the audit that we just had, they looked at the G fund?
They looked at the G funds and admitted that this is by far the most difficult element of the district's financial operations to monitor and control.
And the G fund is not to be confused with the general education fund. This is basically like clubs and different activities.
This is all club and activity that primarily exists at the building level for different student functions and student activity opportunities.
So why did they consider this the most difficult to track?
Because there are so many people that collect and distribute the funds. Every one of these clubs has its sponsor, and every one of these sponsors is responsible for collecting the funds and reporting it to the business office for monitoring and control. And it's difficult to have a standard set of operational procedures for 250 different clubs and activities going on. And it's difficult to monitor those 250 individuals to make sure that they do comply with the established norms of the business office.
In your vast experience as business manager in the past, is there perhaps a better way to do this? And do you have any suggestions for the district?
We had some workshops for activity club sponsors during the beginning of the school orientation procedures that took about an hour to an hour and a half that were presented by the business office and the people responsible for collecting those funds, and that may be something the district would like to entertain for the start of the next school year.
That was done at your previous district?
Yes, sir.
But it's not being done here.
I don't know that it is. I wasn't around. Someone else would have to say whether it is or isn't, but that's a tool that can be used and was used in my experiences in the past.
Okay, maybe take that on advisement, and just kind of paging through this, I did make a comment to Mr. Yagi about the solar panel project. I thought they had gathered about $100,000 in funds, and that was reported, but here in the G fund it says $58,464, so we obviously, I think these things need to be reconciled from time to time and then figure out, what's going on with these funds, because that would be almost $40,000 of funds that are not actually being reported or on the books here, right?
My understanding is that there was approximately 100,000 collected, but at this point in time, there's been approximately 60 turned over to the district for safekeeping.
And the 60 is reflected on this report.
Yes.
Where's the other 40?
I believe it's probably in transit to the business office from the activities sponsor.
I think that what your comment was earlier, so we're not picking on Lisa Fernandez, so we're not picking on her group and the good work they've done, is that this could be the case in a lot of different areas, and we just, with additional staff, we should probably spend some time do what you said, is do a little awareness training for anybody in the club on what they're supposed to do with the money and how quickly it should get into the bank.
That would be a very appropriate topic for an in-service session at the beginning of the next school year.
Are there any further questions on the G Fund?
I had just something that maybe you could look into for the future. I was surprised to see the Western Suburban Conference referee payments in the G Fund. That do we, you know, that's not handled at the building level. I assume that it was WSC referees. It's one of the last line items. So I was just wondering why would that be part of like our clubs and activities and that part of the running of the school?
I think they have different clubs, they have different tournaments and stuff that are outside of the IHSA.
I just wanted to look into it. Thank you.
I will look into it, prepare a report for Dr. Law, and he will get it out to the board at the first opportunity. You're welcome.
All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda is the status of the 2013 construction projects.
The 2013 construction project continues to linger with a lot of punch list items, and I believe it would be in the district's best interest to extend the services that Mr. John Nyman has provided the district in the past to help out with the construction-related programs. And I would recommend that when the board considers this recommendation from Dr. Lott be approved and John be engaged for another few days to try and close out the 2013 and some of the remaining 2012 issues. Although the 2012 issues are clearly going to extend into the spring and summer, with the two primary items being the rain garden, which is not going to be able to be wrapped up until the early spring at the first opportunity, and the HVAC shutoff valves at Central will be something that could most easily be accomplished in the summer when the heating is not being needed.
And Gary, as you know, I've been very impressed with the service John has provided with the district, and you wrote a very nice letter about how effective he's been, and earlier you also wrote a letter about the chaos that you basically encountered coming into the business office, and I really think that needs to be made public, and especially talking here specifically about John. You've been here many times where we heard from the audience that the district is hiring 4 to 5 high-paid administrators, etc. So this is a waste of money. And maybe just talk a little bit about what John's been paid and how John has been an asset to the district.
John Nyman is a personal friend and professional friend of mine whom I've known for 20 years. John was a former school superintendent and school principal and ended his last 20 years of employment with the New Trier Public Schools as a director of the physical plant. So John had considerable experience in handling and working with construction projects, architects, and construction management firms. And upon my arrival here, I discovered that we needed to bring some matters to closure in the areas of the construction program for 2012 and 2013. And I asked John if he would be willing to help me out on a per diem basis of $400. So John worked about 31 days so far on behalf of the district. Has been the total amount that John has engaged his talents to benefit the district. And I'm thinking that another 10 or 15 or perhaps even more days would be wise for the district to consider in bringing our construction-related matters to closure.
And maybe specifically, you could, just off the top of your head, give a few examples of things he uncovered and how his being here for 400 hours a day saved much more than that.
Well, John discovered a lot of punch list items that hadn't been brought to closure, and those are the little nuisance things that have a comparatively small value associated with them, but an extensive amount of effort and time and energy required to bring them to closure, because you have to bring the contractor to the table, the architect to the table, the construction management firm to the table, the individuals at the school district that are impacted by the different matters to the table, to reach consensus and agreement on how to bring them to closure. And John's efforts and talents and ability to communicate with the architects involved and the contractors involved and the construction management firms involved, based upon his 20-plus years of experience and his educational level, have just been invaluable to the district. Specifically, some things that he's discovered in the HVAC situation at Central were invaluable. We had ongoing problems with projectors in the science wing that when we plugged them in, they would blow a circuit, and his experience in that area has been extremely valuable to the district. We have a plan of action in place now for just a few $1,000s of expenditures. We're bringing that matter to closure. John worked ceaselessly to get the demolition of the house at the corner of 57th and Madison to closure. That wasn't being handled properly by the construction management firm and others. I already mentioned the HVAC work at Central, so all of those things were not a lot of work left to be done, but extremely time-consuming in bringing them to closure, and I frankly did not have the time to devote to it, so I was just overjoyed that John was willing to come to work for us for a very reasonable amount of $400 per day.
I mean, John is probably the most, the best deal that we've had out of any single one of these contract hires.
Except for Gary.
Except for Gary, of course.
No, I think he's probably as good or better a deal than I am.
I'll talk about the value.
He's the real thing.
He's been, on HVAC, we based at least $150,000 of valves that were not installed. So there was scope that was missed by the contractors, and he's got it settled without using lawyers and kind of forcing everyone to the table. We had a $35,000 bill that was handed to us by the contractors for the rain garden fiasco, which was, of course, not the taxpayers' fault at all, and we've got that completely pushed back on the contractors and the designers. And the list kind of goes on and on. Even at South, on the ladders and railings that went up on the roof, you know, he's got that sorted out as well in terms of the scope. So there's scope items that contractors try to not do, and he makes sure that our interests are aligned, and that he's also made sure that we didn't have to pay legal fees for this. So it's been a win-win situation. I think we need him for at least 30 to 45 more hours to get us past our scope. And
Do you mean days though?
30 to 45 more days to get us through the 2012 and 13 closeout and 2014 capital projects bidding, which is the next thing on the agenda. So I think we can talk all day about how good he is. With kudos to Gary for bringing him in, and thanks for John for his hard work.
Good. If there's no other discussion then on the 2013 construction projects, we'll move on to the proposed 2014 construction projects.
I wrote a memorandum to Dr. Law in that regard, where I suggested it would be beneficial if the Board of Education as a whole could find some time to review the master facility plan that was developed by Perkins and Will in 2011, as well as review the major effort of capital project compilation that was undertaken by myself and John over the past 3 months. And I apologize to Dr. Law and the Board of Education. I omitted a very important step in this whole process. Before that happens, it should be presented to the facility committee, and then the facility committee's recommendation be presented to the whole board. But I think you need to take a look at your entire needs in the facility area before you decide to spend any significant amounts in any one area. You need to take a comprehensive look at what was presented to you by Perkins and Will in January of 2011, and then the results of that capital needs survey that the business office conducted over the last 2 or 3 months, and then blend those together to develop your expenditure plans for the next several years in the capital improvement area.
So Gary, question in that line, we're already behind where we want to be and going out for bids, et cetera. So going through that very involved process, looking at master facilities, seeing what plugs in here, et cetera, doing all that, how do we go out for bids before April or May?
I realistically don't think you're going to be, you may be able to go out for bids by the beginning of March, but that would be pushing things very fast. And probably if you decided that you needed to do some major additions, for example, to alleviate the potential overcrowding at Central, you're not going to have those projects done until January of 2015 at the earliest, and maybe later. I have to be honest with you, that's my perspective of how it would unfold.
I think this comes, well, thank you for that. I think what he's referring to is we have a list that was generated from the buildings, from a ground up, and we have lists prepared by Hinsdale South and a list prepared by Hinsdale Central. And that list was given in a very rough draft format to the Facilities Committee, and we reviewed that and asked them, and we had some challenges to different items that they had proposed. And the idea was the buildings would go back and review their lists and refine items that weren't justifiable and add items that the committee had discussed with them that were justifiable. So at this point in time, the committee has never received the refined list, and we're hoping to get that back in late December or early January, and we still don't have that. So that's one item. The second item, that point I wanted to make is what Gary is referring to is the possibility of turning some classrooms, some space in Hinsdale Central to new classrooms, which is a big project in itself, and not part of what the 2014 capital projects, I believe, were ever envisioned to do, because those are more than the 1.5 million total we have budgeted for the capital, for the design and engineering, and for all of the overhead. So while I think it would be noble for us to go, and we have planned to go through the master's facility plan in Q1, I think that we should be looking at expediting the projects that the staff has generated from the ground up. And if there are larger projects, like a classroom project that's $500,000 plus, that can be handled on its own schedule. We shouldn't bring back all these other small projects that are great projects that the staff has brought up. We've had teachers that have brought up projects, we have buildings and grounds people, we have administration people, and I think what I'd like to do is try to get back on track with our original plan to get those to the Facilities Committee meeting ASAP, and then the Facilities Committee would then vet that and make some recommendations to the board and go forward with those projects. And if there's some additional ones that are over and above that, we can consider those at a later date, but those are also going to be over budget. And so we should handle those kind of things, I believe, separately. So that would be my 2 cents on handling.
I totally agree with you, Mr. Corcoran. My comments earlier were in reference to major construction projects that we might determine are appropriate to undertake for the district. I'm not talking about the smaller scope projects that you referred to. I totally agree we should undertake the ones that smaller in scope. In my previous comments about probably not getting started until March and completion January of 15 would be for the bigger scoped projects, not the smaller ones you're making reference to.
Yeah, we should just keep in the one box of $1.5 million maximum for capital for 2014. And anything that's not in that box can't be considered and shouldn't, let's say, hijack the rest of these great small projects that have already had a bunch of groundwork for. So I would like to kind of press the reset button. Let's get the staff with those lists, get the final list in, and let's have an expeditious meeting with the Facilities Committee and bring that back to the board, hopefully at the next board meeting. And then once we get that list prioritized with Rick and Mike and I, we can then debate that at the board level and allocate the monies to be approved for the design. Because right now, we don't even have design for these small projects, and we want to get that design going ASAP.
But
So
is there anything wrong with, on a separate track, looking at the master's facilities plan, the larger project?
there's nothing wrong, actually, that is the plan. The facilities committee discussed that. Q1 was the time for us to dust off the master's facility plan, bring Perkins and Will in, have an open meeting, and have them represent the master's facility plan, and let's call it dust it off, so everybody understands all the money and time that's been spent on it, so that when we start redoing the master's facility plan this year, that we don't forget everything that's already been learned about it. So all those things were planned, so I would like to just, let's get it back on track and keep the small projects in the small project box, and the big projects in the big project box, and move forward.
So Bruce and Gary, can you get back to buildings and basically have them shake down the original ideas? But the one idea, as Ed alluded to, that is wonderful, I don't think anybody could object to it, it's win-win, especially for the students, is to get building and grounds out of Central, which eventually makes them more effective as workers, and also opens up some more space for our students. And that's one of the things that the building wants to do for the summer.
Yes, so for the audience, the one larger project, but not super large project, was one that was already envisioned and scoped out before, was to move the buildings and grounds gentlemen that are, and there's a couple ladies, that are situated in about 4 or 5 little cubby holes around in Central, and bring them into one location at the far end of the building and move the loading dock out, because in that area where they're at now is where the future construction is going to be, if there's any construction, but future construction is going to be. Also, we have productivity issues with having the buildings and grounds gentlemen and ladies located in 5 different spots. And so the idea was to put them in one location, get them out of the different locations, and that then frees up the infrastructure. So that is the only one project that we were considering that would take some design efforts. And I still think there's, no matter what, there's a lot of credibility and probably consensus as well in terms of getting that design done. Even if we don't do that project, we should at least move that one forward in terms of design, and then bring it to the board when we have some numbers.
I'm glad to hear that you're going to be looking at the master facilities plan. I think there was a lot of time, effort, and money spent on that several years ago. My concern is just making sure that the projects that you have going forward for next year don't maybe conflict with the facilities plan, and that if you end up doing something next year and then 3 years down the road, you got to redo it because the master facilities plan, calls for doing something different. So I just want to make sure that in comparison, you don't maybe overlap or conflict with both sets of lists.
Well, I think that's the idea of it. That was the idea, and since you were part of the master's facility plan, we're on the committee, I think you should go there and have some input as well. But keep in mind that the master's facility plan is going to change, because it's going to be dusted off, so these are a lot of hypotheticals, and we want to...
We knew it was a living document.
Right, everybody knows. I mean, the master plan is always a living document. So I think if people have concerns, they should go to the meeting and express their concerns.
All right, then next on the, if there's nothing further from anyone, next on the agenda is the Student Services Report from Dr. Powell.
I understand there are some questions in regards to the program review, which will be completed end of first semester, which is this week, and submitted as a report for the February 3rd meeting. So I'll come back to you at February 3rd with the program review and share that information with you. And in terms of the costs for the transportation, overall, I know that you have some questions about the number of students. And so if you would pull out the document that has the list of transportation costs, I can give you those numbers for October and for November. For the Grand Prairie Transit, for October there were 66 students, so it fluctuates a little bit each month. but 66 on, for Grand Prairie Transit, 1 for North Shore, 5 for Special Ed Systems, 1 for Septran, 1 for First Student, and 11 in the AM regional taxis. And those numbers are relatively the same for November. Grand Prairie, however, has 65 students, and there are 14 students in the taxis for November.
Now, Dr. Paul, like for instance, North Shore Transit was $3,400 and we had 1 student.
That is correct. Without providing specific information on that student, I can tell you that transportation could involve movement of medical equipment. It could involve a paraprofessional on the bus with the student. It could involve a nurse on the bus with the student.
And then the other thing, you explained this before, but is there a way around this? And we want to be sensitive to homeless students, but our total taxi bill was $19,000, about $12,000 that went to homeless students. And in a previous report, you told us that some of the transportation was from Wilmette, Chicago, Oak Park, Brookfield, etc. And for the common person on the street, that makes no sense. And if they're currently living in Brookfield or Wilmette, whatever, even if we have a legal, even if the student still has a right to come here, can't we hit up the schools where they're currently residents to pay for the ride?
Yes, and we do that. We have a template letter that I can provide for you if you'd like to see that. But once we know that there is a student who is, determined to be homeless, and we provide the transportation, we bill that district monthly, and they're asked to submit half of the cost of the transportation. And for the most part, we're pretty successful with that. I will say that sometimes it's a little challenging with certain districts, and we pursue it though.
And a student who is originally homeless and then they go live with an aunt in Elgin, are they still considered to be homeless when they're in a home?
That's correct. If it depends. Well, when you say originally homeless, I'll give the scenario of the student being our student, and then the student becomes homeless for whatever reason, and may have to double up. That's in the eyes of the law. When they double up, they take shelter in someone else's home, be it a grandparent, an aunt, a friend, a cousin, and then they are considered to be homeless because they are sharing housing with someone else. And at that point, they have a choice of which school to attend. And it could be that they want to come back to their school of origin, and they have a right to that. And that's where our obligation then comes into that transportation.
And one last one, for homeless students living within the district,
Mm-hmm.
and I would hope that's the majority of them,
Mm-hmm.
why wouldn't they take a bus like the other kids?
For homeless students that are in the district, that's exactly what happens. In fact, very often, we do not provide transportation for homeless students because they may have a ride from a parent or they may walk to school. But there are situations, for example, as you noted before, if we have a student who lives in Chicago or another suburb who doesn't have access to transportation, we do provide that. And our choice has been taxis. I did do a cost analysis for you on the difference with taking the Metro train and having a taxi go to the Metro, or in some cases we've looked at the student taking a bus to the train. And frankly, for the amount of time that it would take a student who lives, for example, in Chicago, to get to the train and then finally to Hinsdale, to the district, be it Hinsdale South or Hinsdale Central, it's really a lot of time, almost, in some cases it could be close to 2 hours. you know, my opinion on that is that's not an educationally sound decision to make in terms of supporting students.
But is it really educationally sound to be in Oak Park and to choose to come here?
Well, again, the law is clear that the student has the choice, or the family has the choice on the school of origin if they want. You know, the premise of the law is so that there is not to be disruption for the student's educational placement. And it really wasn't about the parents. It mostly really focuses on the students so that they, you know, are protected in terms of the disruption in their educational career.
Dr. Paul, that's, I think all that is very important. It's because we're here to educate the kids. In the back of my mind, when we're talking about a choice, or you know, a choice of where a child ends up when they're under a homeless condition, there's always economics involved at some point in time. I don't know, I have no experience with this, but if someone's choosing to live with a friend in Chicago versus choosing to live with a friend in, you know, that might be closer, if it's, you're always going to make it easier by having a taxi at the front door, no matter where they live, they can go live up in Elgin, then that portion of the equation doesn't make sense, because you're making it, the difference is they can live anywhere, anyone can live anywhere, and they're still going to get pulled by a taxi at their door to you know, crawl out of bed and get into the taxi and come to school here. So while on one hand we have the balance of being able to, of wanting to and providing the service, the other hand, the economic equation doesn't make sense, because you're giving people an incentive to do anything they want wherever they want without having any responsibility.
I think you gotta take that up with the state legislature.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dr.
so it's
Paul,
always
right?
that time.
I don't know. So I don't know if that's a state law that you have to provide taxi door to door.
You know, Mr. Corcoran, we do not have to provide taxis. We have to provide transportation, and it needs to be safe for the students. So, you know, I think while that cost of 11 or 12,000, it fluctuates. Some of that is special ed transportation too, but in terms of the transportation, we're not talking all of the homeless students, and I do understand your questions. And that is the board's prerogative. You know, if you direct me to do that, I'll look into it.
I don't see it as a major priority. I just wanted to make, because the average, you know, an outside observer is going to look at that and say, come on, you know, people all have bad situations, but we're going to have everybody all over the state. But I'm more interested to hear your February 3rd presentation and how we're doing on the LADSI transformation, because that's where the bulk of your resources and your teachers and how they're doing in terms of the students going to LADSI to hear. I'm very interested to hear that.
Are there any further questions for Dr. Powell? And hearing none, we'll move on to human resources and Dominic Maniscalco, monthly employment report. Thank you, Dr. Powell.
The monthly employment report has been uploaded for your review. There's nothing essentially to report, nothing specific to report. It's there. If you have questions, you can let me know. I'd like to skip down to bullet point 2, the Robert Half search firm. On December 16th, the board had asked the administration to inquire of an executive search firm to find the chief financial controller position. We did, and we are making a recommendation to the board to approve the Robert Half search firm. The contract has been uploaded. There were some parameters given to us on December 16th. One of the parameters were not to exceed 33% of the total compensation of the individual, and there was a salary range given at the time. We were able to negotiate with Robert Half to fix that annual salary regardless of what it is. So we fixed it at $160. So if the individual is making more than $160, we still pay it at $160. And we were able to negotiate a lower percentage. The board authorized 33, we got it at 30, which comes out to $50,400. broken out in 3 payments.
Is there any sort of guarantee that they can have candidates in our hands within 2 weeks, a week, whatever?
So essentially, the first start of the first run would take about 3 weeks, give or take a few. If the board approves it tonight, they will start first thing tomorrow, and they said that they will be in my office tomorrow afternoon. So it just, exactly, they know that I need this position hired yesterday. We all need this position hired yesterday. And Dr. Law and I are very confident that this company will do exactly what, they do. They're very reputable. We looked at 4, they were the top out of the 4.
And they have experience with both corporate and education?
Correct.
It's just a question, Dominic, for me. I'm only comparing this to in the private sector. We typically pay search firms when and if we hire someone. These people get 2 installments whether or not they get in one. Is that typical here?
Well, I was instructed to go towards the retainment route versus the contingent route. So it's just a matter of what the board decided, or.
Oh, because that was less money?
It's different. So if we hire on a contingent basis, we only pay them if our candidate is actually hired. If we hire on a retainment basis, we have to kind of front load the money a little bit more. We have to front load it in 2 first installments and then a third when the individual is hired. So it's,
What would have the percentage been if it was all contingent,
I believe it was anywhere from 20 to 25% if they hired an individual, but, that was the direction I was given.
So is it ultimately cheaper doing it this way?
Oh, I can finish my line of question, because I think that's exactly the issue. What is 25% of 150,000? 37, 5? Now, what am I missing? I'm just, if we went to 25% of 100, was it 150?
I believe it was, we locked it in at
160?
160.
Okay, 40.
We locked
That's
it in.
easier math.
We locked it in at 160 with this round of negotiations with Robert Half.
I understand. I mean, I don't want to disrupt this process because it's too important to get this going, but do you see how 25% of the 160 is 40 grand? And it's only paid if we get someone.
I see that.
What am I missing?
Does this make us married to them, that we have to hire through them, where a contingency would be if we found somebody other than through Robert Half, correct?
It's the perception of the board.
The concern was if we use a contingent fee search, because there is obviously some logic. You get several firms on a contingency fee basis, and then they start competing with each other, because otherwise, they don't get paid. But the other way of the concern though was that if we did this on a contingency fee basis, they wouldn't work quite as hard. That they know that they need to deliver us, a candidate, and by having a retained search, that they're going to be the ones that we're looking for, and it gets higher on their priority list.
Weren't they already working? Weren't the firms, you had already met with the firms and you had already talked about?
We talked to firms about doing it on a contingency fee basis, and there's just not the same level of commitment. We never got to the point where we engaged a firm and they actually went out and looked for candidates for us on a contingency fee basis. We never got to that point. But we did talk about doing it on a contingency fee basis, and it's just not the same level of commitment.
I thought that you had actually met with all of them, because you met with these 4, and that we met with, I thought you had already engaged to and said, okay, show me candidates, and we got no candidates.
On December 16th, when the board authorized that salary range with that certain percentage, I reached out to the 4 that I guess had already been previously communicated with back in October when Russ was here.
Yeah, before that time, Dominic, we were waiting to see candidates, and we just never saw any candidates. And so at the time, we thought that the contingency fee was not gonna, work.
We never engaged a firm on a contingency fee basis. We did have a round of interviews based on candidates that applied, but we didn't use a search firm for it.
There was communications between the previous interim director of HR and these firms, and I was literally given a stack of communications. Nothing was followed through. So I inquired into all 4 firms on a contingency basis as well as a retainment proposal. And it seemed as though if we went the retainment route, we'd have more of a guarantee, and it seems like it would expedite it a little bit quicker.
What gave you that impression?
I mean, for example, Robert Half, it seems as though they were a lot more efficient to respond back to me. They were getting guaranteed money. It seemed as though they were going to work a lot harder. That's the impression I got, but ultimately, at the last board meeting, there was a dollar amount there, and it seemed as though that was approved to be able to use.
And the importance of this, and wanting to make sure that we get, and we should say, getting candidates for this position is even more difficult than finding principal candidates.
Yeah. I didn't want to waste the board's time, lock in a contingent fee. We don't find anyone, now we're another 2 months behind, and now we start the search all over again to do retainment. I think the board already approved a certain dollar amount, and you're okay with us, using it. I think it would be in the district's best interest to just, let's get someone in place.
So Dominic, we're within the dollar amount that we approved in December?
Correct. We approved, the highest end of the salary, I believe, was $185 that the board approved. It was $185,000, and I was able to lock it in at $160.
Victor, I've had the same experience with you as you, but that was when you're in a company and you're frequently hiring so that the headhunter firms know they're going to get business. And these firms, I'm not sure they were showing any interest in terms of the contingency fee basis in terms of, so that to me was, is one of the factors. I think we are where we are.
Yeah, I mean, this is too important to a position, although it baffles me that people don't want a $50,000, they don't want to work for a $50,000 contingency.
This second question I have is really, we have a second position that's not been filled, so what's the plan on that?
The Director of Financial Controls?
Yes,
No.
yes.
That was just posted today, and I have not been authorized to use a search firm for that.
And Ed, don't you want the CFO involved in finding that, or do you find it without it?
Ideally, you'd want everything to be under the new person, but we're now 6 months after when we first identified the positions that were necessary for us to get in compliance on our financial reporting. And so, the staff has had a difficult time finding the purchasing officer, the director of financial controls, and the top person. So, it's.
So what do we want Dominic to do with this other position?
I'd like to hear what Dr. Law has to say, Bruce has to say about that.
Well, I thought that what makes sense to me before we commit to spending thousands of dollars is we should try to find a person on our own. And see the candidate pool based on, advertising position, aggressively advertising in the IASBO website and the K-12. I mean, any way we can do this to see what's out there. If the pool is shallow, then we can engage a search firm to help us out. But that obviously comes at a high dollar cost.
But Bruce, aren't we better off getting a CFO in the next 2 months and then letting him get energized and finding somebody?
No question, but in the meantime, we could advertise a position, we could see who applies, look at the candidate pool, Dominic could look at this and say, you know what, the candidates just aren't there. And so that we don't lose time in waiting for that person to be on board, then see who's in the candidate pool.
Yeah, this debate's a circular argument because you're going to have the number one person come in, and they're not going to have the number 2 and 3, the person is at number 3, but they're not going to have the number 2 person, and they're not going to have the purchasing officer in. So you have the number 1 person in, and they're going to be frustrated like Gary's been, Dominic has been frustrated. So that's a catch-22.
The problem is, how do non-financial guys hire financial guys? Because don't put me on that committee.
Well, let's let the administration, I think, do what they would, they believe is the right thing, and let's have a time frame. If we're not producing candidates within X amount of time, we have to pull the trigger and get the headhunter in, because we've already gone through that route for 6 months and here we are with nothing when we were spinning our wheels trying to do it ourselves. So we're not going to be headhunting.
I'm pretty confident that we'll find a more than qualified candidate for the Director of Financial Controls.
Well, you know what Larry the Cable Guy says, get her done.
That's
My
what we're
question is, why is Dominic executing the contract for that?
Initially, I negotiated with Robert Half on behalf of the board, and I told them that once they had PDF'd it over, I said it should have been addressed to the Board of Education, so ideally, we just posted it as is. If the board approved it, I could execute the contract on behalf of the board if the board approved it. Or I can have the contract changed and PDF to you guys tomorrow. Whatever you approve, as long as you approve the amount, I can have the contract changed and have Claudia sign it.
Should be changed, and you want me to sign it?
Sure.
So what do we want to change, Claudia?
The person signing the contract.
Well, I think we should do this. We're spinning our wheels too long.
All right then,
I
so,
make a motion to approve the contract with Robert Half for the chief financial controller position.
so the suggestion motion is that we'll have you as the move into that, approve the contract as presented between District 86 and Robert Half for a total expense of $50,400 payable in 3 installments, except that, we're gonna amend that to, the board president will execute it. So it's moved by Ed, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Rick, roll call please.
I have a question, please. For this 50,400, where is that coming, is that within the budget? Where is it coming from in the budget?
We'll find an area in the professional services under the superintendent's area of responsibilities or the business office's area of responsibilities and take it from that. We'll advise the board where that specific authorization is from within the next few days.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a first and a second on the floor, roll call please.
Mr. Kuhn?
No.
Mrs. Gallo?
No.
Mrs. Clancy?
No.
Dr. Skoda?
Aye.
Ms. Manley?
Aye.
Mr. Cassini?
Aye.
Mr. Corcoran?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda, which involves various routine items of a nature that are routine. So we have support staff and certificate staff, and I would like to pull the support staff proposed.
Would that be all of A1 or?
I would like to pull A2C, clarification.
C. C, all right. Are there anyone else who would like to pull these?
I don't want to pull anything, but I just wanted to discuss a few things. We have 3 retirements for 2016. And I'm confused why somebody would not take advantage of the full 4 years of 6, 6, 6, 6, and just take 2.
That's when they chose to go out, you know.
And the other thing, Dr. Law, if, well, 2 things. In the past, we always saw the letters of resignation, etc. And I think that's good to see. And then also, when we're hiring support staff, if you could tell us what they're being employed at and what they're replacing the person for.
I think that's a, just get back and just do, I think Dominic, there's a standard package that you could, probably have a checklist for that every time, that way it's not random requests.
So Dominic, what happened before is that with non-certified, you would have your salary and then put the salary of the previous person they're replacing. And then also generally with resignation letters and retirement letters, you know, a copy of that would be attached.
So, a copy of the actual resignation.
Of the actual letter that the board would see.
I want to clarify, my concern is, or my question is about the extension, which is John, he's under support staff employments, so I just wanted to.
So we're kind of pulling.
Well,
So
we
is there
actually,
So,
I'm sorry.
Mine is a different person.
We initially put it under there because we figured it was under employment, but we categorized that as employment extension, but I see how you can construe it as support staff.
Well, I just want to make sure because I want to ask the question, so I didn't know which one to pull. Well,
Oh, we're gonna word the motion now.
Oh, Dominic, I want to apologize, you did provide that information about the old salary, the new salary. Thank you.
It's about the employee extension, even though it's not listed there, it's the same person, so we can just keep it as C, even though it's not.
ATC.
Yeah.
All right, so we're looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda minus A1B and A2C. Is there a motion? Moved by Victor, is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Before we go there, do we want to just keep John to 15 days?
Well, Jennifer just pulled that.
Hold it.
Oh, that's old?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, roll call?
Ms. Gallo?
Aye.
Mrs. Blanson?
Aye.
Dr. Skoda?
Aye.
Ms. Manley?
Aye.
Mr. Cassini?
Aye.
Mr. Corcoran?
Aye.
Mr. Kuhn?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So now on to the amended agenda, which is hard to say, for public or audience comment.
Let's see if I can get on that.
Yeah, mine was just a clarification on the extension. Is that a closed session issue? I just want to know the number of days. Okay.
Okay, so my name is Carla Feinheim, I live in Hinsdale. I just have a couple of questions. Are we hiring a principal for South and vetting that principal exactly the same process as the central principal is vetted? Exact same way, because it seems to be fast. Some people from South have asked me that. The other question is, when we're hiring these search firms and American Heritage to ferret out students who are here illegally, are we taking bids on these, or are these no bid contracts, we're just hiring them? And just my comment that in light of all of the zero levy and all that discussion, that we keep an eye on all of the things that we're spending money on, all the new administrators and all the fees and services, because I would not want to have to do the budget shortfalls if there, God forbid, should be with bake sales or co-branded sales. So that's all I wanted to say. So there are questions in the community about how South's principal is being hired and about how the smaller contracts, if they're being bid out, multiple bid contracts. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board?
Bruce, you maybe want to say something about what we plan to do with what's going to South?
I can. We're moving ahead with the accepting applications, and we'll begin reviewing those soon. And we have an administrative process that was approved by the board for all administrative hires. We'll be following that. We will have opportunities for the South community to meet and talk to and engage the finalists. They've already had the opportunity, just as they did at Central, to provide input as to the characteristics that they would like to see in the next principal. So will it be the exact same process? I can't say it'll be the exact same process, but will there be the opportunity for South community to engage with principal candidates? Of course.
And my understanding is that it is seemingly moving forward quickly because we do not want an interim there next year. We want to have somebody who's...
That's correct. I mean, we're not on the same time because we didn't have as much advance notice at South as we had at Central. So we are trying to get this done in as expeditious a manner as possible.
And in fairness to Dr. Law, he was following up with a process that had already been set in motion by a previous superintendent. This is his plan or administrative plan to attract them.
So I think the process at South will not be identical to Central, but similar. And also, Dr. Law, could you explain why you recommended the board that we hire the residency firm and what that's all about?
We had two firms that we were considering. It's a specialized service, so it's not actually required to go out to bid in a formal process, but nonetheless, whenever we're doing services, we want to get more than one firm that can provide those services. We actually went with the less expensive firm at first, and the results we got back were not satisfactory. So the fallback firm was the first firm we had, which we used, and the board approved a not to exceed amount. And as we continue this job of making sure that the students who are educated in this district actually reside in this district, we'll go out to bid again and put it out there and see what other firms are able to bid on this before we continue our engagement with American Heritage Protective Services.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, the other item Carl asked about was the headhunters. And the headhunters, it was sent out, there were 4 firms that were competitive bid on that, so Carla, that was done. And I think there's a summary comparison sheet that probably could be released at some point in time, so that was done in a competitive manner.
Okay, so there are no other individuals who wish to address the board, so we're looking for a motion to adjourn to closed session. When we adjourn, we will take action, in fact, on what's been approved. We're looking for a motion to adjourn to closed session to discuss the pending litigation, collective bargaining, and the appointment, employment, compensation, and discipline, performance, or dismissal of employees. Is there a motion? Moved by Kay, is there a second? Second by Victor. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Clancy?
Aye.
Dr. Scola?
Aye.
Ms. Manley?
Aye.
Mr. Cassini?
Aye.
Mr. Corcoran?
Aye.
Mr. Kuhn?
Aye.
Mrs. Gale?
Closed session.
So moved.
Okay, we convened to open session at 10:39 p.m. We're looking for a motion to approve items A1B and A2C as amended. Did I miss anything? As amended during closed. Is there said motion?
So moved.
Moved by Victor,
Second.
second by Ed. Roll call.
Mr. Corcoran?
Aye.
Mrs. Gale?
Aye.
Mrs. Clancy?
Aye.
Dr. Scola?
Aye.
Ms. Manley?
Aye.
Mr. Cassini?
Aye.
All right, so now we're looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is
So
there a
moved.
motion? Moved by Victor, is there a second? Second by Kay. All in favor?
Aye.